Welcome to episode 59A of Successful Demo. Each episode analyze the theoretical and practical aspects of normally released cards. Today, we will cast our eyes to the final faction we haven't covered for Reign and Reverie in HB. Now, most of the other factions actually receive two new win conditions or archetypes with the 8 cards or 7 cards they've gotten from Reign and Reverie, but HB has only received 1, and a lot of cards are dedicated to this one new archetype, which I call Agenda Spam. All these cards reward the corp for playing lots of tiny agendas and feeding them to the runner. We can see cards like Fast Break and Game Changer and Giordano Memorial Field, which I'll call Giordano from now on, get more powerful as the runner amasses more and more agendas in their score area. And cards like Hyperloop Extension and Meridian feed these tiny little agendas worth 1 and -1 points respectively to the runner, so that the runner can have as many agendas in the score area as possible without winning the game. And of course, Sportsmetal enabling things by rewarding the corp as the runner steals more and more agendas. So it's a very all-in for HB in terms of the cards that they receive for this one archetype. However, do they really work very well together? That's the question. Even though they all seem to point at the same archetype, the big question you have to ask yourself when building an agenda spam deck is, what is your win condition? Spamming agendas isn't a win condition. Feeding agendas to the runner certainly isn't what I'll call winning the game. You have to ask yourself which cards actually help the corp win the game, and as it turns out, it's not very good. If you look at Fast Break and Giordano, they seem to point at a glacial win condition where you build a strong remote server with lots of ice. Fast Break allows you to assemble this remote very quickly in the span of a single click. And Giordano allows you to defend said remote because, the runner cannot make a successful run, or rather, they cannot penetrate the server unless they pay the Giordano tax. So yeah, this seems like a viable archetype, Glacial HB. However, you are scoring agendas the old-fashioned way, right? You're putting agendas in your remote, you're manually advancing them. This is very slow if you are playing lots of small agendas. Scoring a bunch of 3-1 agendas isn't really the way to go to win. It is super slow, and the runner, most importantly, can exploit that by instead hammering your centrals super hard. You will hemorrhage a lot of agendas this way, and Fast Break and Giordano don't really help you defend your centrals. Well, Giordano does, right? Giordano still works on centrals, but you cannot assemble a thick central server using Fast Break because Fast Break doesn't allow you to install cards on your centrals. It only protects remote servers. So yeah, I can see the idea there, but the execution isn't really going to work out in my opinion. Also, it doesn't make use of some of the other cards, which we are going to see. Game Changer is the other card that came with Reign and Reverie, and when we look at it in tandem with Fast Break, we see a completely different archetype being hinted at. This is a big combo turn deck where you attempt to score 7 points, or maybe a lot of points, in a single turn using the ridiculous number of clicks that Game Changer provides. The problem with this archetype is that the biggest enabler for this would be cerebral imaging. You want lots of game changers, lots of fast breaks in your hand, but cerebral imaging is banned. You can no longer play combo decks very well. Not to mention that fast break isn't exactly the combo card that such an archetype is looking for. Typically, if you're playing a 7-point combo deck, you want to begin by installing a bunch of agendas on the table that you will score all in a single turn. You can't do that with Fast Break because it mandates that you install everything in the same remote server. So you can only install one asset or agenda with Fast Break at once, meaning that it's not a very good enabler. Most combo decks would rather play Shipment from Mirrormorph instead. So yeah, again, you can see the idea that is being hinted at with these cards being designed, but the execution is very iffy at best. I can see that Game Changer will be very powerful, especially if you recur it with archive memories. You can gain lots of clicks this way, but yeah, that's about as much as it gets. Without the ability to hold many cards in hand, it's gonna be difficult to pull this combo turn off. So yeah, very unfortunate, but hey, not all hope is lost for HB. Today we are going to look at Sportsmetal, Hyperloop Extension, and Gatekeeper in a vacuum. We're going to look at these cards on their own merit, and we'll see that even without the agenda spam archetype, these cards are efficient and powerful in their own regard. First off, Sportsmetal has fantastic efficiency on its own. It's going to pay off every single game because the runner has to steal agendas to win, and when they do, you gain money and or cards. Assuming you build a deck that doesn't have any 3-point agendas, or rather agendas worth 3 points for the runner will have to steal at least 3 agendas and still not win the game. So that's a minimum of 6 credits or cards, or a combination of both, being paid out every single game. This is reliable, right? This is very good. This is Azmari and Palana levels of reliability. On average, it's going to pay out more than that because you will be scoring agendas if you're trying to win the game. So it'll go up to 8 to 10 credits and or cards on average. This approaches the gold standard HB identity in engineering the future in terms of payout, as long as you're playing quick games. ETF will pay out a lot more than Sportsmetal if you're playing a very long drawn Glacier deck that goes on to turn 20 or something. But in quick rush games, spanning less than 12 turns, I think Sportsmetal can definitely keep up with ETF in terms of if you're just going for credit gain. And the option to draw cards is cherry on the top. It's an incredibly powerful side option that you can use anytime during the game in order to further further rush towards the closing of the game. This draw ability synergizes super well with Ginger City Grid, which is in faction, but it also is very well suited for rush archetypes, allowing you to draw combo cards and or agendas as and when you need them. Because of this, Sportsmetal is the best generic money or draw identity for the HB faction. For Jinteki, that honor belongs to Palana, with Mti Wekundu posing very good competition. Azmari is obviously the identity of choice for NBN, and for Wayland, probably building a better world, but Wayland doesn't really have many problems with rush because their agenda suite lends themselves very well to rush anyway. Hostile takeover, standoff, and Oaktown renovation already give you passive economy, so Wayland has less of a need for an identity that does that job. Whereas with HB, Sportsmetal is what you're looking for compared to the other economy or engine identities. Architects of Tomorrow, well, it's pretty good, but the problem is it has less influence, 12 instead of 15, and more importantly, it holds you into the Bioroid Ice Suite, which the runner can then play around. Asa Group, on the other hand, seem very promising. However, its payout isn't spectacular if you cannot efficiently convert the clicks that you save on installs into more credits or cards. Asa providing a potential 1-click every turn. If your exchange rate is 1 click for a credit or 1 click for a card with the basic actions, you can't really fight against Sportsmetal, which pays you so much more. So yeah, Sportsmetal I think is the go-to HB identity from now on, just because it is a notch above Asa Group and Architects of Tomorrow, as I explained. Hyperloop Extension is a new agenda that I did not rate very highly on first glance, simply because of its agenda ratio. 3 advancements for 1 agenda point is a terrible agenda ratio, and while there exists powerful agendas with that ratio like House of Knives and Quantum Predictive Model, those are very niche agendas, and Hyperloop Extension doesn't fit in a niche in my opinion. However, competitive players have proven me wrong, as they have brought this card to the spotlight and done very well with it. And I guess that's because it's a trap card like no other. It instantly pays off 5 credits if you factor in Sportsmetal's identity ability into it, if the runner stumbles on into this agenda at all. That's a very powerful trap card. It's like Exploder Palooza, but the best part is you actually want to score this agenda as well. When you score this agenda, you still get the 5 credit benefit, so that basically offsets the tempo loss from scoring said agenda. It's like an Oaktown, right? If you think about it as an Oaktown Exploder Palooza wrapped into a single card, that's pretty powerful. So yeah, That's why it's powerful, and it's only worth 1 point from the runner even to get it, so not the biggest loss for the corp. And when you score it, you get one step closer to winning the game, and at the same time get some tempo out of it. Scored or stolen is a very strong clause, which is why SSL endorsement is a nice go-to 5-3 agenda. Hyperloop extension acts kind of like SSL endorsement, but it's a lot more instant in the sense that the 5 credits pay out immediately, and it doesn't advance the runner's win condition as much as an SSL endorsement would. For these two reasons, Hyperloop extension is a wonderful agenda in Sportsmetal decks. Less so if you play out of Sportsmetal. But as I said, because Sportsmetal is already so high up on the power curve, I think Hyperloop extension will see some play regardless in the HP faction from now on. Right, moving on to the final card. Gatekeeper is the new Enigma for HB, but better. It has nasty face check punishment. If you thought losing a click was bad, read what Gatekeeper does. Yeah, it allows the corp to hide their agendas and speed ahead with 3 cards of draw. It has a very interesting effect, unlike most other cards, where on the first turn where it's rezzed, it has crazy amounts of strength, but it drops down to 0 strength after that. The thing is, the dropping down to 0 strength isn't a deal breaker at all, because if you think about it, if you think about the prevalent code gate breakers that exist nowadays, Black Orchestra, Gordian Blade, Abac Nail, all these breakers don't really care if your ice is 0, 1 or 2 strength, because their base strength is all at 2. These breakers have base strength of 2, so it costs exactly the same to break an Enigma as it does a 0 strength Gatekeeper. Because of this, its baseline as a 3 to res 0 strength ice is equivalent to that of Enigma in terms of taxation power. And the 6 strength that you get on the first turn is just icing on top of the cake. Because of this, it acts as a very strong Punisher card for HB, combined with the fact that it's not a Bioroid. Now this is very important. Previously, runners were conditioned to run without decoders against HB. It's completely fine as long as you're running on your first click. That allows you to click through the nastiest of code gates in Fairchild 2 and Fairchild 3. Right? And there aren't many other code gates you have to worry about in the HB faction. This is no longer the case because Gatekeeper is a new HB code gate, just like Architect was when it was first released. Back in the Lunar Cycle when Architect was released, runners were conditioned to running first click against HB in case of Itchy 1 or Itchy 2. Architect came in as the new unclickable sentry, and now people have to run against HB with the sentry breakers, otherwise Architect will fire. Same thing, if you don't run with code gate breakers, Gatekeeper will fire, and let's just say HB is going to gain a lot of tempo out of it. Even if you're prepared to fetch your decoder, say you have a Black Orchestra in your bin or an SMC on the table, having to deal with the 6 strength of Gatekeeper immediately is a tough ask. That's a lot of money that's going into pumping your breaker to 6 strength. So it's a very nasty piece of ice, and it's a wonderful face check punisher that HB would definitely welcome in this day and age. So what do these 3 cards have in common? Well, it's quite obvious that they're all rush enablers because they clicklessly allow you to gain credits and or draw cards, which is what rush decks need. This is their win condition because by clicklessly getting free money or free cards, that allows you to draw into your agendas, which you can score, and that allows you to gain the money needed to advance said agendas. This way you can score more agendas in the span of time before the runner finds the entire breaker suite and starts locking down your remote. This is a very important point to note. Rush decks work so well because they get to match point 5 or 6 agenda points before the runner's fully set up. That forces the runner to check the remote every single turn for agendas, which makes them play suboptimally, and that's how the runner loses. This archetype is what I and how should I put it? This is a strategy which I particularly am fond of, and there's a little special name for this strategy that was coined quite a few years back. I took this deck called Jammy HB to, I think it was Nationals 2016. Yeah, that was 2 years ago. So yeah, Back then, Sportsmetal wasn't a thing, but with ETF, you kind of did the same thing. You score agendas early and often. Back then, we had accelerated beta tests and Project Vitruvius, so we had lots of agendas to put on the table, never advance, and the runner has to check every single one of them. This time, with beta tests out of the window, it seems like that archetype is no longer viable, but you'll be sorely mistaken. We have enough agendas in faction to still play Jammy HB, because now, besides the Project Vitruvii, we also have the Hyperloop extensions, which are 3 advanceable, and we also have very powerful 4 advanceable agendas in Remote Enforcement and Corporate Sales Team. If the runner ever lets one of these get scored, HB will zoom ahead very quickly. And they are very easy to score. You can single advance them with Arella Salvatore, or you can score them never advance with 4 clicks. The additional click being provided by G's Model Bioroids or Baltic Labor. So very powerful, and even in this, with the new cards that came out in the recent cycle, and Geofront and Rashida Jahim, that's even more bluff cards that work as a win-win for the court. If the runner checks them, they're not getting agenda points. If they don't check them, you're still zooming ahead with money and or cards. That's amazing. The best part is we have also received great ice to build wonderful remotes that just completely taxes the runner out. We've received Gatekeeper as mentioned, but there's also Surveyor, which does a wonderful job of punishing runners without good sentry breakers. All this mean that we can build a reasonably taxing 1 or 2 ice remote that the runner has trouble breaking, and that is what enables the Jammy HB archetype. Every single turn you slam and jam something into the remote, the runner has to check it, otherwise it could be the game winning agenda. So yeah, if you're ready, let's
come on and slam, and welcome to the jam. Come on and slam, you wanna jam. Come on and slam, and welcome to the jam.
Well, we are up against Smoke today, so we definitely need to live up to our deck's name of slamming and jamming, otherwise we are going to lose to remote lock. Smoke just makes very quick work of our code gates. Our Fairchild 3 is pretty useless in the face of Refractor. Now, so I immediately get to work on the remote. I also protect HQ. With Sportsmetal, this is actually important because as you draw cards with your ID ability and Rashida, you need to defend HQ. Because as you can see here, I'm very much agenda flooded, so I'm very happy to have the HQ ice. Now I chose vanilla HQ Gatekeeper remote for a simple reason. Gatekeeper remote is pretty good because once Smoke attempts to run it, you know, it can hold its own for at least a turn, because as long as Smoke only has 1 stealth credit, they can't actually break Gatekeeper at strength 6. So that will make for a very durable one-use remote. Now my opponent is smarter than that. They're not going to run my remote first click, afraid of any end runs and especially Gatekeeper, so instead they plink off R&D, allowing me to score this agenda here. Now I actually had quite a hard time deciding between Hyperloop Extension and Vitruvius. One gives me more tempo, the other gives me more points. In the end I went for tempo. I'm not sure if that's the correct play, but we stick to that anyways. The extra tempo allowed me to spend my last click playing Hedge Fund. And taking... actually, it didn't really, no. I would have been able to play Hedge Fund either way. So I probably should have scored the Vitruvius here. I don't know, pretty iffy either way. But thankfully, my opponent now attempts to run a remote and they get a rude surprise. They have no breakers, so they are going to lose to Gatekeeper. And we are going to get our plus tempo effect of plus 3 cards for free. And we get to mitigate any agenda flood by shuffling agendas from archives and or HQ into R&D. I only have 1 eligible target in the Ikawa, so I can only shuffle 1 back in, and I choose not to. This is not an ability you always have to use, and in this particular matchup, I found it much more useful to keep my agenda in hand. At the end of the day, HQ is still better protected than R&D, which is currently getting indexed. So yeah, I wasn't going to get any agendas off R&D if I put them back into R&D. I'd rather have agendas in hand, because once I score this Vitruvius, the next thing I want to install in the Arella Salvatore remote is the Ikawa project. Get an advancement counter on it and try to score it, bringing me up to 6 points very early in the game. As my opponent steals a remote enforcement from R&D, they host it on Film Critic, which is yet another iffy decision in this game. Yeah, I'm really not sure about using Film Critic to counter Sportsmetal. My opponent spent 1 credit and 1 click installing the Film Critic just to deny me a single Sportsmetal trigger. That is a very bad trade. 1 click and 1 credit for my 2 clicks, or rather my 2 credits on my 2 cards, is pretty bad a trade. Yeah, so I found my opponent's Film Critic play rather marginal. I mean, Sportsmetal is a big ability, but if you're not going to continuously shut it down, it's a lot less useful. You could continuously shut it down by liberating the agenda from Film Critic and then hosting any additional steals onto the same Film Critic. But again, you're trading 2 clicks because Film Critic requires 2 clicks to use for my 2 clicks on Sportsmetal. You know, 2 credits or 2 cards are worth 2 clicks at most. So very bad trade for my opponent. So yeah, Film Critic play a bit questionable. We move on to the next stage of the game where I'm trying to score this Ikawa project out. To make it less conspicuous, I instead play the acid spam game where I put 2 G's Model Bioroids on the table, so that doesn't draw attention to the remote. My opponent might think it's an NGO front, but they are going to contest it anyway, which is a big mistake on 2 counts. Firstly, they don't have the 2 correct breakers to get in. They need a killer and a decoder. All they have is a single SMC, and by rezzing the sentry here, I'm forcing my opponent to actually get the killer instead of the decoder that's needed to break the end run subroutine. So my opponent's not getting through this remote, right? And the second layer of defense is, even if they get through this remote, they're not going to steal the Ikawa project because they have no clicks remaining and their Film Critic is loaded. So yeah, no matter what, they were not stealing this Ikawa this turn. I still wanted to rest the Architect here though, because yeah, I wanted to force out their dagger so that they'll take that much longer to find the refractor. Of course, this sets me back 1 turn. I cannot score the Ikawa here, I'm too poor. I need 6 credits, 2 to rest the Jeeves and 4 to quadruple advance the Ikawa and the remote. So here I had to take a turn off taking credits, rest the Jeeves and then take money. Another interesting question is, should I have, instead of playing the Jeeves game, I could have easily played Biotic Labor and quadruple advance the Ikawa and my remote instead. The reason I chose not to do this is because I'd rather have the Biotic Labor available for me for my final agenda to be scored. Scoring this Ikawa doesn't win me the game. I still need 1 more agenda. Typically that's either a Hyperloop or a Vitruvius, and having the Biotic in my hand means that it's that much easier to close out the game in the span of a single turn, rather than having to jam into the remote every single time. This particular remote isn't taxing at all. It's only 5 credits for my opponent, so yeah, I would like to have that fast advance option available, especially since my opponent is lagging behind in terms of setup, which means that they are probably not going to get clawed out anytime soon, and even if they do, Sacrificial Construct doesn't seem like a card that they're playing. Alright, my opponent lands their second indexing here, and I'm helpless. Being the pauper that I can't afford to rest the toll booth on R&D, so they do get to see the top 5 cards of my deck. Now this is rather unfortunate because it means that for the next 5 cards on R&D, there will be no agendas. My opponent will steal them all. So with no agendas in hand or any upcoming on R&D, my closing out the game is going to be delayed, which is a big problem against Remote Lock Smoke, as they steal Vitruvius here. I seriously consider the 2 cards option. Even though I'm poor, I need to dig through my R&D as quickly as possible, because I know that the next few cards of R&D are not going to be agendas. I should plow through my R&D so that there's a higher chance of me drawing an agenda to win the game. Right? At this point, I badly want to see agendas in my hand, so that's why I chose to draw here. Now I score the Ikawa. I get to Arella Salvatore. There's only 1 good target in my hand, that's the NGO front. Hopefully that will bait a remote run. And then I took 2 credits because I need to be able to threaten something like scoring a 4-2 agenda in the remote. So my opponent knows I'm running remote enforcement. That remote card could be a remote enforcement. I need to take money here from Sportsmetal in order to make them, induce them into running it. Right now, they might think, hey, this remote seems impenetrable. Smoke doesn't have a refractor. No decoders out. This should be an easy agenda score for the game win. So my opponent finds their Code Gate Breaker. It's not the ideal Code Gate Breaker. It's a Die V. That's a problem. Now, even though our Gatekeeper's back at 0 strength, we must not forget that Die V actually costs 2 stealth credits to use. Your break subroutine's ability costs 2 credits, and they must both come from stealth credits. My opponent, having just set up the Net Mercure, only has 1 stealth credit available. So they were not able to break the Gatekeeper. Okay, so that's a very important subtlety there. They couldn't actually get past this remote. Divey cost them too much stealth, and they weren't adequately set up. They were too busy running, trying to contest my remote repeatedly to no good effect. So they were forced to jack out after the Architect. That was a mistake on their part. But we haven't won the game yet. It's not our game-winning agenda in the remote because we didn't find any other agendas yet. That is an NGO front that gives us a bit of money. Thankfully, however, our opponent left us with a pleasant surprise. The 5th card on the indexing turned out to be a Hyperloop extension that we can win the game with because we retained the Baltic label from earlier. Instead of scoring the Ikawa with Baltic, we used the Jeeves extra click to score the score the Ikawa, which means that the Baltic label here allows us to fast advance safely. With no clot threat on the opposite side of the board, we win the game. That was an incredibly decisive victory, and it all came down to the pure speed of this deck. You really slam and jam with this deck, and if you find an early Arella Salvatore as I did, you just run away with the game. I managed a turn 8 victory. This is incredible, even for a rush deck. With most other rush decks, assuming your opponent's actually putting some pressure on you, as my opponent did, they were constantly running my remote and indexing my R&D, you usually can't win till the double-digit turns, but turn 8 win, goodness me, that's crazy. I'm so happy that this deck is actually able to outspeed Smoke, winning the game before she's fully set up with her breakers and her stealth suite. Because that is the weakness of Shaper, and it's nice that there exists a Corp deck that can take advantage of this weakness. Resource management was very key this game. You'll notice that I was compressed for resources throughout the entire game, so much so that the R&D ice I put, the Toll Booth, was basically useless. Didn't have enough money to res it, and I wasted a click installing it. The game ended with I only ended the game with 2 credits, a very close shave, and being able to close out the game was all thanks to all the cards in the deck that pulled their weight individually, and yeah, when put together collectively, they are a force to be reckoned with, giving me a lot of clickless forward momentum. 12 free credits between my Identity and Arella Salvatore with Sportsmetal. Arella Salvatore super good as well, giving me extra clicks as well. The fact that she saves clicks dropping cards in the remote and advancing them is crazy. Actually, this is a mistake. Arella Salvatore did not save 3 clicks. She saved 6 clicks. Because every time you get an Arella trigger, you get a free install and a free advancement. That's 2 clicks. So yeah, Arella Salvatore saves 6 clicks plus 2 from G's Model Baroids. I basically had 2 to 3 turns. I was 2 to 3 turns ahead of the runner. Right, I got 2 to 3 free turns. That's an insane amount of free turns. Not to mention the free cards as well. This is not to be underestimated. The free draw from Sportsmetal, as well as Gatekeeper, my opponent bumped into it once, allowed me to accelerate through my deck like never before, and that was particularly relevant against an indexing runner. Being able to draw through indexing lock faster than usual means that you can actually get to your agendas quicker and close out the game faster than your opponent can set up. So yeah, this deck is just absolutely amazing, but it's not my deck. I think most of you might be familiar with this deck. This is Maxi's Sportsmetal deck that came in top 32 at UK Nationals. It's a very well made deck, and I absolutely love Maxi's art. The little fox there, that art was done up by Maxi. To those of you who haven't had the privilege of knowing Kira Maxi in person, she was a very passionate, enthusiastic Netrunner player, and I've had many fond memories with her. Yeah, she was a very, very ardent fan of Jammy HB. Back then I used to play it a lot, and her sheer passion and enthusiasm for this archetype really motivated me to do well with the deck, and was one of the reasons why I ended up bringing it to 2016 Nationals in UK, even though it was very clear that was a CTM dominated meta. While Kira may no longer be with us, I'm happy to say that at least she has left behind a lot of wonderful legacies. One of which is this utter beast of Jammy HB deck. I absolutely love this Sportsmetal deck. This is one of the most fun I've had with a HB deck in recent times. In fact, recent months, maybe even years. MC austerity policy was strong. Glacier Ginger HB was cool and all, but this rushy Jammy HB, woo, feels so good. Reminds me of good old days of Netrunner. Thanks, Kira, for everything you've done and all the content you've created. This video is dedicated in memory of you.